Greetings! It's been raining on and off all day, but let's talk about the connection of liminal spaces to our topic this week, which is the representation of knowledge. Liminal space is a concept that's being talked about a lot lately. If you're like many people, you may have noticed that there are certain places or states of being in which you feel different, off, or uncomfortable. Often, these uncomfortable spaces turns out to be liminal spaces. Now, my groupmates will talk about first, the categorical conceptual knowledge, second, the semantics, networks, and schemas, and of course, what's the liminal spaces. Then lastly, the connection between the two. What is conceptual categorical knowledge? More formally, categorical knowledge is a process of establishing a memory that improves the efficiency of assigning novel objects to contrasting groups. In addition to facilitating the categorizations of objects, categorical knowledge also facilitates a variety of cognitive processes. The categorical organizations of our knowledge strongly influences the way we encode and remember our experiences. For example, when recalling the last time you visit Starbucks, a coffee shop, you might utilize not only the episodic information related to that specific visit, but also general knowledge and experiences accumulated over many coffee shop visits. You might recall that you ordered a tall coffee not because you have detailed episodic memories, but because you have knowledge that coffee sizes are called tall, grande, and venti, and you typically order tall coffees. In this example, it is apparent that categorical knowledge can be used to facilitate recall. However, you can also imagine how this knowledge can lead to errors. For example, the last time you visit the coffee shop, you were really tired and ordered the venti instead. Although using knowledge for specific visit would result in error, using categorical knowledge to aid memory is an average advantageous strategy.
For this activity, we will relate this week's topic, representation of knowledge, to liminal spaces. But before we get to the complex parts, let's jump into the basics. For example, schema. What is schema? Schema is a cognitive framework that helps us organize and interpret information. In basic terms, schema helps us figure things out easier in the world by organizing the information we already know. It allows us to take shortcuts in interpreting the information that's available in our environment. Just like in the video we watched this week, we tried to figure out what the scariest thing is, and that's the elevation of carbon dioxide in the blood caused by an uncontrollable external threat. Duh! But before we got to that conclusion, it was obvious that death is a scary thing that we humans avoid, consciously or unconsciously. And listed under death are things like suffocation, falling, the unknown or abnormal, etc. Under suffocation, we have water and confined spaces. In falling, we have heights and flying. In the unknown, we have dark and distorted images. So how does it work? You'll go into the water or confined space, you'll think of suffocating, and that suffocation can lead to death. You're afraid of heights? Valid. You fear falling. No blame on you, because falling can lead to death. Afraid of the dark or distorted images? That's fine. It's the unknown and it can lead to death. That's just it. And since we want to avoid death, we will avoid all the things that we know can lead us to death. And that's how schema works.
Liminal space is a concept that may sound unfamiliar, but it's something we experience in our daily life. It can be described as going through a change or the space between what is and what will happen next. In other words, liminal space refers to the actual space or time in which you shift from one phase to another. It's a gap and can be physical like a doorway, emotional like a divorce, or metaphorical like a decision. This is where one thing ends and another is about to begin. But you are not quite there yet. You are in space between. A psychological liminal space may be recognized as more of a life transition or a shift between two ways of thinking. Our mind likes things to be regular and consistent. It craves and creates predictability since our brain has trained us to avoid anything where we're not 100% sure of the outcome. So when people find themselves in liminal states, they're often accompanied by feelings of anxiety. From an emotional perspective, a liminal space describes the time between the ending of one part of a person's life and the beginning of the next phase. In the metaphorical liminal space, there is usually a decision of some type to be made, and until that person decides one way or another, they'll be swinging in a perpetual state of liminal uncertainty.
Liminal spaces or liminal states can be said as the transitional period of life, a change from one thing to the next, a threshold to the unknown, and a passage to growth and potential. Experts say that this space is more often accompanied by uneasiness, anxiety, and fear due to what you call the unknown. Since humans don't know what to expect in the new stages of their life, they get anxious and uneasy about the uncertainty that might happen. Fear of the unknown, or fear in general, is somehow connected to the avoidance of death and is directly tied to our sense of survival. They are things that we learn in response to what our amygdala tells us to avoid, because they can lead to our death. You only get to know what's scary and what's not if you have the knowledge, if you've been around or alive long enough. This can be the reason why babies don't get easily scared, because they still need to develop certain cognitive or neural memories to know what they should be afraid of.
Liminal spaces refers to the place a person is in during a transitional period. It's a gap and can be physical like a doorway, emotional like a divorce, or metaphorical like a decision. The tricky part to negotiating this void is that it also holds a huge helping of the unknown, and by and large, experts say humans don't like to exist in a space of unpredictability. People move through countless physical liminal spaces through the day and mostly don't notice, like when you're in a hallway heading from one office to another, or sitting in a waiting room. In many situations, people do not remember exact physical details of what they have seen or heard, but rather the meaning of what they have encountered. In an attempt to become more precise about what is meant by meaning, cognitive psychologists develop what is called a propositional representation. The concept of a proposition, borrowed from logic and linguistics, is central to such analysis. A proposition is the smallest unit of knowledge that can stand as a separate assertion. That is, the smallest unit one can meaningfully judge as true or false. Propositional analysis applies most clearly to linguistic information.
By creating a memory trail, categorical knowledge increases the effectiveness of allocating unfamiliar objects to comparison groups. Numerous cognitive processes are made easier by category knowledge in addition to the categorizations of items. Our ability to encode and recall past events is significantly influenced by the categorical arrangement of our information. A cognitive framework called the schema aids in the organization and interpretation of information. It could be characterized as undergoing a transformation or as the interval between the present and what comes next. A psychological liminal space may be seen as more of a transitional period in life or a change in perspective. Liminal states or spaces can be thought of as a person's pace of transitions as they move from one thing to another. According to experts, because of what you might refer to as the unknown, this region is more frequently accompanied by unease, anxiety, and the terror. The avoidance of death and our sense of survival are inextricably linked to dread, to unknown, or fear in general. A person is said to be in a liminal space when there is a transition taking place. It might be literal, like a doorway, emotional, like a divorce, or pejorative, like a gateway. A decision negotiating this vacuum is difficult because it also contains a lot of uncertainty. According to the experts, people dislike being in an unpredictable environment.
I don't need to think about it. There's nothing in this world that we can't do. Flowers